The ocean is an alien world, more of it left unexplored than the surface of the moon. It's a realm of breathtaking beauty and unimaginable strangeness. We're diving into the discoveries that ignite pure wonder. Bizarre bioluminescent creatures, ancient ruins hinting at impossible timelines, and naturally occurring phenomena that seem designed to leave scientists scratching their heads. Forget everything you think you know and prepare to be amazed.
This haunting call. Whales truly are some of the coolest animals on Earth, and humpback whales are no exception. The males of the species are known for their songs, which last from 10 to 20 minutes and are actually pretty complex. They will repeat these songs for hours at a time, and it honestly isn't exactly known why they sing these songs at all. All the males in the group will produce the same song, and it will change seasonally. The females are also able to produce noise, but for some reason it is only the males who seem to produce these long songs. It is unclear how the whales even produce these sounds, however, because they don't actually have vocal cords. This is all super cool and interesting, but the whole reason you're here is for the sound, so let's take a listen to a more haunting track released by the humpback whale. Okay, so please tell me I'm not alone in thinking that that was the most beautifully haunting sound I've ever heard come from the sea. But also imagine being alone in the ocean, not knowing what that was, and then hearing it. Probably pretty terrifying, right? At least we're all safe here in YouTube land. In our number 9 spot today, we have this marine chorus. Okay, so out of context, if I played you this sound, what would you think it is? Definitely not something underwater, right? Well, as it turns out, this sound was indeed captured under the water, and these are the sounds of fish calls. While I always expected the chorus of marine animals to sound a little more similar to the stylings of Sebastian the crab, apparently that isn't even close. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't even know that most fish had calls, but it turns out that our human ears just can't perceive all of the hoots, moans, barks, and chirps that take place in the vast seas. This recording actually helped scientists realize that there are fish who sing together in a chorus every day at dusk and dawn. There have now been around 800 species of fish that have been identified and confirmed to make some form of noise, and apparently some fish even engage in shouting matches in noisier parts of the ocean, which is kind of hilarious to imagine. I guess on the list of creepy noises, this one is less creepy and more just informative. In our number 8 spot today, we have the whistle. This is a sound that was first recorded in 1997 by the NOAA and was the source of many mysteries for years while people speculated about what may have caused the sound. While it still isn't exactly clear, it is now believed that the sound may have come from an underwater volcano eruption. If you didn't know, underwater or submarine volcanoes are located in all oceans on our Earth, and they're extremely interesting. There are certain kinds of marine animals that only exist near these extreme environments. Many submarine volcanoes are located near the areas of tectonic plate formations, which are also known as mid-ocean ridges. There's a YouTube user called Some Canadian, and they left a comment on a video of this whistle sound that pretty much sums it up exactly. First, we'll listen to the sound played at 10 times the original speed. The comment read, quote, "It could be the sound of something moving through tunnels. 1. Volcanic eruptions and gases. 2. Something big and hungry. You choose." I think they might really be onto something there. In our number 7 spot today, we have bloop. Why are all of the weirdest ocean sounds first recorded in 1997? Bloop is another one that came from that year, and it was a loud and unusual sound that was placed as occurring several times off the southern coast of South America, and it was so loud that it could be heard over 5,000 kilometers away. At first, researchers were confused because, while the sound was actually similar to known sounds of living creatures, it was just way too loud that not even the blue whale, the largest living creature, could have produced it. So what is it then? Well, as it turns out, it is in fact not the Kraken, and instead it is actually consistent with ice quakes that are generated by large icebergs as they crack and fracture. It seems like this sound, going with that explanation, doesn't really make sense, but hey, I'm no scientist. But here's the sound for you to judge for yourself. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Western Pacific biotwang. In 2014, researchers and scientists heard weird sounds coming from the Mariana Trench, which, for the record, seems like the worst place for there to be strange noises coming from. For years, experts couldn't pin down this sound, and it was dubbed the Western Pacific biotwang, and while there is now a theory that was proposed by researchers from Oregon State University, they have also said that they might be entirely wrong. First, for reference, here's a little clip of the sound I'm talking about. Okay, so if you're like me, my mind immediately went to something alien related or some sort of creature that perhaps we haven't yet discovered. I mean, this is the Mariana Trench we're talking about. The theory put forward by the Oregon State researchers was that perhaps this may be a new type of baleen whale call. Okay, that's probably the best of all of the options, but I really don't like when someone tells me the answer to a scientific mystery only to tell me that that might not actually be the answer at all. While the low part of the sound would make sense to attribute to the baleen whale, it's the end high-pitched twangy part that would be incredibly unique. The wide range of frequencies in the sound are what continues to baffle those who are trying to find the source of this mysterious sound. In our number 5 spot today, we have Julia. Julia is a sound that was recorded in 1999 by the US National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, which I've already talked about today. It sounds like it could be straight out of a horror movie, so considering it was a sound that came from our ocean and at first no one could tell where it had come from, it really was quite frightening. The sound has now likely been demystified, as researchers are pretty positive they know the origin of it. It is now believed that this sound was caused by an iceberg running aground off Antarctica. The sound, however, was insanely loud. It was so loud that it could be heard over the entire equatorial Pacific Ocean autonomous hydrophone array. Researchers were later able to narrow down what they believe may have been the point where the sound originated, although they've never actually been able to pinpoint it exactly. Most of the time when people hear the Julia sound, they hear it sped up at 16 times the original speed, but today we are going to listen to a clip of the sound at regular speed because I think it is much more eerie this way. In our number 4 spot today, we have knock. Okay, this is one that I'll admit was not captured by a submarine, but it was still underwater and it truly is terrifying. A few years ago, a beluga whale named Knock, who was unfortunately in captivity, was recorded as he swam below the water. Beluga whales have been called the canaries of the sea, and for good reason, but Knock really wanted to up the ante and instead blessed us all with this sound. Knock had this uncanny ability to mimic the rhythm and tone of human voices, and it truly is kind of frightening. It of course is also a little sad, as part of this was probably because he spent most of his life being forced to listen to humans speak because he was being held in captivity. Before this recording of Knock, the voices of belugas and their sometimes human-like sounds have been talked about, but Knock was the first time it was recorded, and honestly, I kind of wish it hadn't been. In our number 3 spot today, we have the bioduck. Since the 1960s, this sound has absolutely stumped researchers who heard it. This sound was basically what the name attributed to it would suggest. It sounded like some sort of mechanical duck. For decades, researchers would hear this sound and it would often be heard and recorded again in the spring and winters. After all of these years though, it seems as though the answers to this mysterious sound are finally coming to light. In 2013, researchers attached sensors that collect acoustic data to 2 whales. One of those tags recorded for 18 hours and the other for 8, and the whales they were attached to were traveling with other whales in groups of 5 to 40, and they were all eating basically the entire time. Throughout this time, with the tags on the whales, there were a total of 32 calls heard, and this data is what led researchers to finally understand where the bioduck sound was coming from. As it turns out, this mysterious sound was actually the call of the minke whale. Researchers still aren't exactly clear as to what the call means to the whales, but it was a fantastic discovery that finally closed an almost 50-year-old scientific mystery. In our number 2 spot today, we have Upsweep. We all know how little we know about the ocean, and that also includes what kind of creatures lie in it. So while this mysterious sound out of context probably wouldn't be that freaky, when put into this situation it becomes quite a bit more eerie. This sound is referred to as Upsweep Upsweep, and it was caught when the Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory started its sound surveillance system in August of 1991. The sound is apparently more seasonal, with its peaks in spring and fall, but it is unclear if the changing of seasons is responsible for this sound, or if it's coming from something that lurks in the ocean and remains undiscovered. Just for reference, here's a clip of that sound played at 20 times the original speed. It is possible that this sound could be coming from underwater volcanic activity, but it is also possible that it's not, so who really knows? In our number 1 spot today we have an earthquake. Okay, so to add another creepy Mariana Trench sound to this list, we have one that was taken from the bottom of the Challenger Deep. In fact, it was the first ever sound recording to be taken from the bottom of the Challenger Deep, so it's a pretty cool scientific advancement as well as a terrifying sound. Despite the crushing pressures and the fact that there's no sunlight, the Challenger Deep is actually pretty noisy, and that is because of the fact that sound travels a really long way underwater, which ends up kind of turning the Challenger Deep into a sort of echo chamber of oceanic sounds. So while the recording was able to pick up things like the sound of a boat almost 11 kilometers overhead and the sounds of whale calls, they were also able to pick up the sound of a magnitude 5 earthquake rumbling near Guam on July 16th, 2015. Not gonna lie, while being one of the scariest things I've ever heard, this is also one of the coolest things I've ever heard in my life too. Science really is just so cool sometimes.
At number 10 we have an octopus nursery. 8-legged alien looking things with suction cups all over their arms and beaks for mouths. Octopus are creepy looking things, and to top it all off they can camouflage like a Navy SEAL, and they are super smart. If these are the kind of things that make your skin crawl, then just running into one of these guys would probably freak you out. Well, on the underwater expedition at the Davidson Seamount, there was a rather shocking discovery. They had a remote probe that was on the ocean floor around 10,000 feet, and they came across which seemed to be an octopus that was next to not just one, not just two, but a group of 1,000 octopuses in a nursery. They were all there laying their eggs and using the heat from the volcanic vent to keep them warm. I would hate to be the guy who accidentally steps into that crack and then gets devoured by thousands of sticky arms. But if you're at 10,000 feet underwater, you probably are already screwed. At number 9 we have the Siberian lake monster. Of course, if we're doing a list of scary things that live underwater, we have to throw a giant mysterious sea monster on here. What separates the Siberian lake monster from other more popular guys that we have seen like Loch Ness and that kind of stuff is that underwater scans have actually picked this guy up. This thing is deep in Lake Labinkur, and some radar has shown that it looks like a 33-foot long creature is living there. Now this is probably just a skeleton, but if this thing is dead, it means that there was once a giant man-eating monster in this lake. I thought we were supposed to be safe in freshwater. They've nicknamed this thing the Devil, so you know he's a good time and loves company. So next time you go up to the cottage and you're swimming in the water and you feel safe, remember there might be a giant monster lurking underneath the water ready to turn you into a side dish. At number 8 we have the blue hole. Now there are several blue holes in the world. There's one in Belize, there's one in the Red Sea, there's a giant one in my heart that was left there from when Reboot ended on a cliffhanger. How are you going to end a show that so many people fell in love with on a cliffhanger? I will never trust again. Well, this one is between Cape Verde and the Caribbean islands. Scientists are really confused about this thing. It's a crack in the bottom of the ocean floor and is several thousand miles long. What's strange about this is there's no explanation of how this happened. It might have been tectonic plates moving around, but when this happened, the Earth will probably start to repair itself, and there's been no sign of this. My theory is this is where Godzilla goes to sleep at night. I mean, it seems like the most logical answer. It's either that or the gateway to hell. Like, come on guys, I'm doing real science work here. At number 7 we have the Yonaguni complex. This was discovered by scuba divers in the 1980s. I think that's the scariest part about this one. Could you imagine going scuba diving back in the 80s? The technology back then must have been a tube going up to some guy who would blast fresh air down to you using a bicycle pump. I don't even think they had decompression sickness figured out out back then. The chances of you coming up the bends was probably super high. Well, if it wasn't for a few divers in Japan who were willing to sacrifice it all to look at some cool stuff, we wouldn't know anything about the Yonaguni complex. It's still a mystery as to what this thing is. It looks like some temples that might have existed thousands of years ago, but when the ice age decided to melt, it would have covered this entire area. This could be why an entire civilization got plunged underwater. Or the temple could have been on a cliff, and then when a massive earthquake hit, it knocked the temple into the water. But like everything in life, there are some haters who say this whole thing is just a natural rock formation. Some people just want to ruin everything. At number 6, we have Anacor twista. One of the reasons why the underwater world is such a mystery is because we find things like this in there. Sure, there are beautiful things down there like bright fish and chubby marine mammals, but there's also the unknown, unidentified organisms like Anacor twista, which should be the name of an 80s hair metal band. But what is this thing? Well, it's a protist. And what is a protist, you may ask? Well, it's an organism that doesn't belong to any animal group, fungus, or plant group. What does that mean? I really have no idea, you guys. I think it means it could be an alien. Some alien came down to Earth for a swim and then scraped its knee on some coral, and now we have alien creatures running around the ocean, probably waiting for you to pee so it can swim up your pee hole and then work its way into your brain. It's really the only logical answer. At number 5, we have the Bimini Road. How were the pyramids made? Was it aliens coming down to share their technology and secrets with us, or was it just thousands upon thousands of slaves who sacrificed their lives and their spines to build them? Well, we don't know and we may never know, but the Bimini Road is another one of these mysteries. It's off the coast of the Bahamas, and it looks like it could have been a pathway that was placed perfectly with giant slabs of rock. Similar to the way the pyramids were made, it seems that these large slabs of rock were too large to be moved by man, and also like the pyramids, these giant slabs were also perfectly placed so well. So where does everyone's mind go when something like this happens? Well, magic or aliens. The logical answer is that this is a natural phenomenon of the water moving and hitting the rocks to make these formations, but people think that this was made using advanced technology from aliens and could have been the road to Atlantis. Honestly, I like the Atlantis theory much better. It's more fun. At number 4, we have colossal squid. Yeah, this thing is a big no thanks for me. So everyone always talks about how there might be sea monsters out there, but this thing actually exists. There's never been one caught alive, but several have washed onto shores dead, and they are massive. The largest one ever discovered was 45 feet long, and it was dead. So you know there was an even bigger one out there that killed this guy. They don't even have suckers on their tentacles, they have hooks. Let me say that again. This squid has 10 giant arms covered in hooks. This thing is straight out of a horror movie. Scientists aren't even sure what something this big eats. They think it probably feeds on whales or your deepest, darkest fears. I wouldn't be surprised if the colossal squid works part-time as a gatekeeper for hell. It makes me think that the old Greek stories about the Kraken might have been real. At number 3, we have underwater circles. Giant formations of circles that are formed underwater, and nobody knows how they got there. These mysteries were discovered off the coast of North Carolina, Florida, and Belize. Now, what are they? Like many things on this list, myself and the entire scientific community have no idea. But here are some theories. Maybe they were formed naturally by either two things, water currents or some sort of animal mating ritual. Another idea is that these things were made by ancient civilizations before the Ice Age. All these things would have been above ground and might have been art left over by some old-timey tribes. And the third theory is that they look kind of like a bullseye, so it might be some sort of nuclear missile target, and if you hit it hard enough, the explosion will cause some sort of major natural disaster like an earthquake or tsunami, or if we're lucky, both. At number 2, we have megalodon. If you have a fear of sharks, you're gonna love this one. Megalodon was a prehistoric shark that was even bigger than the giant hooked tentacle beast that was earlier on this list. If you've already forgotten about the colossal squid, it clocked in at around 45 feet long, where megalodon was closer to 60 feet long. It was a 60-foot shark that could probably rip a blue whale in half in one bite. Well, maybe not that, but it was still a gargantuan creature with teeth the size of Brock Lesnar's fists. This thing wouldn't even chew you, it would just swallow you whole and then fart your skeleton out into the dark, cold ocean. At number 1 on our list, we have giant eyeball. A mysterious giant eyeball washed onto the shore of a Florida beach back in October of 2012. I don't know any other kind of giant eyeball other than a mysterious one. There's no super common regular giant eyeball just lying around. But this is also Florida. This is the state where people smoke crack at weddings and kiss alligators on the lips, so maybe it's a little more common over there. Well, this giant eyeball was found by Gino Cavacci, and he didn't know what the hell to make of it, so he took it home and then stuck it in his freezer. Then he called the cops, and the cops came in and told him, "We don't do giant eyeballs on the beach. You have to call the wildlife people." And then he called the wildlife people, and they were like, "What the hell is that?" And he was like, "I don't know. I brought it to you guys to try and figure out what it is." And then some people were like, "Maybe it's a sea monster," and other people were like, "No, it's probably from a marlin." And I think in the end, no one really knew what the hell it was. But just so you know, there's giant eyeballs out there just laying around the beach sometimes.
Starting us off in our number 10 spot is Jakarta, Indonesia. It is reported that most of the city could be underwater by the year 2050. That's in most of our lifetimes. It is currently sinking up to 6.7 inches a year already due to excessive groundwater pumping. This ain't good either because it can create a change in pressure and volume that causes the land to sink. Now on top of that, with the rising oceans, this city is right next to the Java Sea, and it won't take much rising for this city to go underwater. This one is truly tragic, as it doesn't just have to worry about rising sea levels, but also sinking land. Jakarta is home to 10 million people, and just recently the Indonesian government approved a plan to move the city residents 100 miles away on the island of Java so that they can protect their people. This move, however, will cost around $33 billion and can take up to 10 years. So with it being 2031 in 10 more years, I hope they already have it started, and we gotta get going right away. Coming in at our number 9 spot, we have Dhaka, Bangladesh. One statistic that I found while looking up this one is that Bangladesh is actually responsible for 0.3% emissions that contribute to climate change. The capital city, Dhaka, is home to 8.9 million people, and many of them could be displaced by rising oceans as early as 2050. According to the New York Times, the country is facing some of the biggest consequences due to the rising oceans. Oceans could flood 17% of the country's land by 2050, and that would affect 18 million residents in total. The city of Dhaka and the country of Bangladesh have already fought with dangerous floods many times, with residents relocating multiple times and anything you can think of. But they cannot keep doing this. These floods and continuous water logging will make it nearly impossible to farm. It is also predicted that by the end of the century, the sea levels are expected to increase by a full 1.5 meters. Now, that might not be much over an extended period of time, but that's the projections as of right now. If things continue to go south, who knows what that projection could be soon. Coming in at number 8 is Lagos, Nigeria. Lagos is Africa's largest city with a population of 21,320,000 people. Holy shnikes. As of right now, Lagos' low coastline is continuing to erode and will only erode faster with the rising sea levels in the ocean. A study that was completed back in 2012 at the University of Plymouth concluded that a sea level increase of 3 to 9 feet could have catastrophic effects on the large city. Now, notice how I only said could and if. Well, as of right now, it is expected that the global sea levels will actually rise around 6.6 feet by the end of the century. In case it wasn't obvious, that's right in the middle of the 3 to 9 feet range. Just like Indonesia, it would take years and billions of dollars to bring this amount of people to safety, but also, we can't keep relocating people. We need to tackle this fight head on. Coming in at number 7, we have Bangkok, Thailand. This one really hurts my heart, as this is one of the places I want to visit the most on my bucket list, and I also have a good friend who has been to Thailand many times and has said it is her favorite place on earth. So let's protect it. But first, just to give you that initiative, is that it is reported that Bangkok is sinking at a rate of more than 1 centimeter a year. Once again, it doesn't seem like much, but it could be below sea level as early as the year 2030, according to The Guardian. They could really use some help, but thankfully an architecture company in Bangkok recently built an 11-acre park that can hold up to 1 million gallons of rainwater and help fight the immediate floods that the city is and will continue to face. Once again, this is only a band-aid solution, and this fight needs to start at the very heart of it all: climate change. Coming in at our number 6 spot, we have Rotterdam in the Netherlands. If you have never seen pictures of this amazing city, look them up. This city offers breathtaking city skylines, beautiful night views, and just amazing sights to see all around. But we might not get to see them much longer. According to the New York Times, 90% of the city of Rotterdam is below sea level already. But just like Bangkok, this city has also made these huge water storage parks to help with the flooding, as well as named the initiative to stop the flooding, which is called Room for the River. It is fairly straightforward, but instead of making room for the river, how about we fix the flooding and rename it to less gorging of the river? Just like us humans, no water bodies like to be overfilled either. Another close tie for me is that I have many friends from this area of the world too, and I know just how much it means to them. We are all connected in one way or another, and when we choose to help each other, no matter how big or how small, it really can make a difference. Coming in at our halfway point at number 5, we have Venice, Italy, another absolutely gorgeous place, and another one on my bucket list I have actually even have some of my own family there as well, in Venice, Italy is in trouble. Currently, Venice is sinking at a rate of 0.8 inches a year. Now, Italy did begin building a flood barrier made up of 78 gates across 3 inlets back in 2003, but this barrier was supposed to be finished back in 2011, but it is now not expected to be finished until next year in 2022. That's 11 years later. Even these band-aid solutions take time, people, and if we are going to spend this much time on a solution, why don't we spend time on solutions that will actually make a difference and matter in the long run and, over time? Don't get me wrong, anything helps, but it's time to look at this seriously. Back in 2018, there were a series of storms that hit the city so badly, and the $6.5 billion project I was just telling you about was obviously not finished yet. It was the worst flooding the city had seen in over a decade. I know they use gondolas quite often in that city, but let's not make it their only mode of transportation. Coming in at number 4, we have New Orleans, USA. I am sure many of you have heard or remember Hurricane Katrina. I remember it when it happened, and it was one of the most devastating natural disasters in history. Now, New Orleans never really saw the end to any of those terrible effects of Katrina, and to top it all off, it is still seeing some really harsh effects of climate change too. New Orleans is currently sinking at a rate of 2 inches per year and could be fully underwater by the year 2100, according to a 2016 NASA study. One of the other major worries is that parts of New Orleans is already 15 feet below sea level, with its location being on the Delta River. This increases its risk of sea levels rising even more. Not only is this one worrisome, but it also is much closer to home here in North America too. But sadly, it doesn't end here, as the next 3 are all in North America, folks. Starting us off in our top 3, at number 3, we have Houston, Texas. Just like Jakarta, Indonesia, parts of Houston are sinking rapidly due to excessive groundwater pumping. It can't be that bad though, can it? Well, yeah. It's sinking at a rate of 2 inches per year, which could lead to a rise in sea levels of meters within our lifetime. Houston is home to 2.3 million people, and the more it sinks, the more vulnerable it becomes to frequent natural disasters such as Hurricane Harvey. Harvey damaged 135,000 homes and displaced around 30,000 people. Now, those are numbers that are a lot smaller than the numbers we have seen from our friends across the world, but that doesn't mean it's any less significant. Because as I said earlier, it's not only Houston that we will have to worry about. Coming in at our number 2 spot, we have Miami, Florida. This one really sucks, as I know maybe a fair chunk of you watching are from Florida, or maybe you're a snowbird from Canada who likes to escape to Florida in the winters to get away from the gross cold we have here. But either way, this one really sucks. Environmental author Jeff Goodall told Business Insider that there's virtually no scenario under which you can imagine Miami existing at the end of the century. He also claimed it being as the poster child for a major city being in big trouble. Miami's sea levels are rising faster than other areas of the world, and it's resulting in obvious floods, contaminated drinking water, and major water damage to homes and roads. They may soon just have to raise all of its structures just to stay above water. Now, Miami is home to just over 450,000 people. They would have to raise all of those structures, and I don't even want to imagine expensive or how long that would even take. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have the Big Apple, New York City. Do we really need to say anymore? If any of you have watched the news over the past couple of weeks, you have seen all of the footage of NYC being basically underwater. From cars driving in water of 5 feet, to people's homes flooding, to swimming rats, to subway tracks and cars being completely downpoured on, it's safe to say that this is a really big issue. This all came after the events of Hurricane Ida, and aside from natural disasters that can continue to flood the city, the entire city is also surrounded by water. It sits right at the edge of the Atlantic Ocean. If you add rising sea levels on top of major storms like Ida, it's safe to say New York is gonna be gone. And for me, this one hits home the most because I have visited NYC a couple of times and I freaking love it there. It also happens to be the closest to our home up here in Canada, and it's only a matter of time before we see the effects of all these floods and sea levels rising right here as well.
And we're going to start things off with Point Dume underwater base. So off the coast of Point Dume in Malibu, there seems to be this mysterious structure lying about 6 miles underwater. Images captured on Google Earth show an oval-shaped object resting on the seabed floor. Looks like it has a large flat top and what seems to be pillars or columns. Looking at it, it definitely looks like the entrance to something. It sits about 2,000 feet beneath the ocean surface, spanning nearly 3 miles in width, and some speculate that it could be more than just a naturally formed structure. And yes, some even think it could be an underwater alien base. Jimmy Church, who hosts a California-based radio show called Fade to Black, was pretty excited about the images, stating, "My first impression was that it was Greek. It looked artificial and didn't look natural. When you're looking at it from above, It's a nearly perfect oval shape. In the natural surroundings, nothing is symmetrical. Everything is eroded and covered in rocks and sloping and peaking, and right here for 2 miles it is a perfect oval with a black separation or outline to it. It just stands out that it has to be some type of roof. It's not unlike a domed stadium or a covered indoor racetrack or an Olympic arena. It's got that feel to it. It looks like a perfect oval man-made structure sitting on a construction site. Next up, we have the Solomon Islands UFOs. There have been some very strange things said to go on here for hundreds and hundreds of years, and not only have locals claimed to see strange lights in the sky, but also coming up from under the water as well, which has led to a pretty intense theory that there could be an underwater alien base there. There have always been local legends of monstrous giants on the islands, 10-foot tall, hairy creatures with flat noses and glowing red eyes. That, combined with the reports of strange lights in the sky, moving with incredible speed and agility, could mean there may be some kind of connection here. You see, some of these lights and strange flying objects have been seen descending down into the trees of the Guadalcanal or rising up from the ocean and zipping around before diving back down. There are also legends that these giants that are said to live on the island move around through subterranean tunnels. So some speculate that beneath the surface of the ocean is this hidden structure where extraterrestrial beings may be conducting their activities. Next up, we have hy-brasil, a small mythological island off the coast of Ireland. According to Celtic folklore, this island is said to lie off the west coast of the country, appearing only every 7 years, usually surrounded by mist. The island is often described as a paradise with advanced technology and a society living in total harmony with nature. Sailors and explorers have reported spotting the island for centuries, claiming to have seen strange creatures and these glowing godlike beings there. Maps from the 14th to the 19th centuries often included hy-brasil, but its exact location was always a bit of a mystery. Now, of course, it sounds like complete folklore, which Celtic culture is absolutely full of, but what if there's something else going on here? Well, some have suggested that the islands appearing and disappearing could have an extraterrestrial connection. The idea is that aliens could be using advanced cloaking technology or have a hidden base on or beneath the island, and the mysterious creatures that some sailors claimed to have seen on the island do sound like they could be alien-like, but it's still a total mystery as to what they'd be doing over there. Next up on the list, we have strange skulls that were found in an underwater cave in Mexico. So in 2012, divers were exploring a cenote and the Yucatan Peninsula where they came across 2 chambers full of human bones, and some of these bones were human skulls, but there was something off about them. They were elongated. Now, the ancient Maya were said to have performed human sacrifices in the area, and skull deformation was also practiced in various parts of Mexico way back when. There are theories as to why, but nothing entirely concrete. One idea is that high-ranking members of society had elongated skulls. Some say that people's skulls were elongated just to differentiate certain groups from one another, but there's also the theory that these skulls never belonged to human beings at all. Pretty common knowledge, of course, that there are tons of conspiracy theories surrounding the ancient Maya, including the presence of extraterrestrials that may have helped them construct all their intricate advanced cities. So could these skulls have belonged to these supposed alien beings? It's possible. Next up, we have the Lake Baikal incident. So this lake in southern Siberia is the world's largest freshwater lake by volume. It's incredibly deep, and there are some pretty eerie stories about it. First of all, there's all the mysterious lights that are reported, not just hovering or flying above it, but also coming from the depths of the water. And there's a very creepy story that was supposedly an attempted cover-up by the Russian government. So in 1982, a team of Navy divers were doing a routine diving exercise in the lake when a number of them started spotting something pretty disturbing. There were all these figures deep under the water. They were tall and slender, well over 6 feet tall, and wearing what looked to be silver suits. Those suits could have also been silvery scales. They also had large, circular, glowing, unblinking eyes. The creatures began chasing after the divers, or swimming after them, rather, and the divers panicked and then swam back up to the surface, and they reported what they'd seen to their superiors, but that's where the story ends. The existence of the strange creatures has never been confirmed or denied. Next up, we have underwater alien bases in Alaska. So claims of alleged alien bases lurking beneath the waters off the coast of Alaska have been around for quite a while, but in recent years, the idea of them has become more of a popular thing, mostly thanks to Ancient Aliens. Thank you, Ancient Aliens. But apparently, there are even eyewitness accounts dating back several decades, which have been mostly undisclosed until recently. UFOologists and UFO enthusiasts have now been turning their attention to the mysterious activities in the waters of Alaska. One incident dates back to 1945, when crew members of a ship reported spotting an unidentified craft. Researchers, including members of MUFON, or the Mutual UFO Network, which is a non-profit organization that studies reported UFO sightings, they think it's possible that extraterrestrial beings have been constructing bases beneath the ocean's surface, and that's because there are tons of reports of UFO movements over the water. There were also a number of UFO sightings in the 40s that weren't disclosed to the public at the time. These undisclosed reports allegedly provide evidence that there are extraterrestrial entities operating in the waters off the coast of Alaska. This next story comes to us from Reddit, and although what this person saw wasn't technically under the water, it was floating just above it, and it's a pretty fascinating account. The story comes to us from user Keslow, who writes, I used to live in Charleston, South Carolina back around 2006, and I had a job that had me leaving home at about 4 a.m. I lived in a bad part of town near the International Airport Joint Base, so when I left, I did a scan of the area before getting into my car. One morning, I stepped out of my home to do my scan and noticed that there were thin, wispy clouds flowing in off the ocean. Basically, it was a thin fog, about 1,000 to 1,500 feet up, moving like a river. I also noticed at this point that there were two effing moons. One is obscured by the thin clouds, our real moon, and the other is most definitely under the clouds. It was a sphere of glowing white light. It made no sound and did not move. After about 2 minutes, it bolted eastward towards the ocean. The glowing light faded quickly right as it took off as well. I've seen planes move near the speed of sound, and this thing went from 0 to like 3,000 miles per hour instantly. No acceleration. Much faster than the speed of sound with no sonic boom. I hope I don't see it again, especially on the water. I always wondered if it bolted because they saw me watching them. Next up, we have the strange reports of a large disc-like object being spotted in the Indian Ocean. Apparently, as far back as 1873, ships sailing the Indian Ocean from the Persian Gulf to the South China Sea have reported spotting a massive mile-wide disc passing beneath their boats, accompanied by large, rotating lights. One of the earliest documented sightings happened on March 23rd of 1873, when the ship Adelaide traversed the South China Sea. Witnesses reported floating over a huge, glowing circular object beneath the ocean's surface. On May 15th, 1879, the crew of the HMS Vulture described the sighting of two large Ferris wheels spinning in opposite directions. The spokes of these wheels were reported to be 25 feet wide, with 100 feet of space between them. There have been tons of these reports in various locations in the Indian Ocean, over the years. On April 4th, 1901, for example, in the Persian Gulf, the crew of the SS Kilwa claimed to see rays of light emanating from an underwater disc-like object. And even in 1943, in the Persian Gulf, a sailor named Matthew Mangle reported a huge glowing disc beneath the water's surface, pacing his ship. And these are just a handful of examples. And coming in at second place is the Michigan Stonehenge. So in 2007, a professor of underwater archaeology, Mark Hawley, made a pretty incredible discovery. It was this arrangement of stones lying on the lake bed, looking a lot like Stonehenge in England. The stones are laid out in a circular pattern, and some even appear to be arranged in a line. They're about 40 feet below the surface of the lake. So what was the purpose of this formation? Could it be the remnants of an ancient civilization? Could extraterrestrials have constructed it thousands of years ago? They look like they've been placed in a pretty precise pattern. Doesn't look to be natural forming to me. And of course, there's also a rock with a mastodon carved into it. Hard to believe something like that would be created naturally. What's also really fascinating is that these stones are believed to be about 9,000 years old, predating Stonehenge by about 4,000 years. And finally, it's only natural that we finish things off with what has to be the most famous strange object discovered deep beneath the sea, the Baltic Sea anomaly. So back in the summer of 2011, a team of Swedish treasure hunters didn't come across any treasure in terms of monetary gain anyway, but they did find something pretty cool, a sonar image that seems to show a strange UFO-like object on the sea floor. Peter Lindbergh, the leader of the treasure hunting team, would be so awesome just to be able to say you're the leader of a treasure hunting team. I could say that and I'd just be like digging through my backyard finding nothing. But this guy actually goes out on boats and submarines and does it. I didn't get that job. Anyway, he's the leader of Ocean X and was pretty astonished by what he had found, saying the object definitely didn't look like a natural formation. And even though a number of researchers have come out and said it probably is a natural formation, I still get excited looking at this thing. I don't know, I'm just not entirely convinced. I'm on the fence about this one. But what do you guys think? Alien craft, ancient artifact, just some mundane natural formation? Let us know down in them comments.
I mean, at number 10, we have the bloop. Now we're going to start off with probably one of the most famous. The bloop was an ultra low frequency sound detected in 1997. It was heard in the South Pacific Ocean, west of the southern tip of South America. Now some people thought it was a sound of a massive ocean creature. The only problem was it was several times louder than the loudest recorded animal, the blue whale. After studying the sound, geologists said it was the sound of a large ice quake. Other people still claim it came from an unknown creature. Next up at number 9, we have the biodug. Now this one might sound like a cute name, but in the 1960s, this sound scared a lot of people when it was recorded around the coast of Australia. It was first picked up by submarines there during the winters. Now they knew it wasn't human-made, but they'd also never heard an animal like it. That sound baffled and scared people for decades until in 2013, scientists figured out that it was the call of the Antarctic minke whale. It was nice to finally get an explanation for it, but that didn't stop people from being scared. Next up at number 8, we have Julia. Julia was a sound recorded by the National Ocean and Atmospheric Administration on March 1st, 1999. It lasted for 15 seconds and was so loud it was heard across the entire Pacific hydrophone array. The clip you're about to hear was sped up 16 times from the original speed. It's thought that Julia was the sound of an Antarctic iceberg running aground. Next up at number 7, we have the train. On March 5th, 1997, a hydrophone array picked up a sound that was loud, high in pitch, and kept steady for quite a few seconds. I think it kind of sounds like some sort of wailing ghost, but others gave it the nickname the train. See what you think. After studying the data, it was thought that the sound came from a very large iceberg running aground in Antarctica. At the number 6 spot, we have the 52 Hz whale, otherwise known as the loneliest whale in the world. This sound came from one very unique whale. Most whales call out between 10 and 40 Hz. Now this one whale has been detected since the 1980s, calling out at an incredible 52 Hz, the only ever recording at this pitch. Because of this, some people have dubbed it the loneliest whale in the world. At first people thought its strange call would hurt its own survival, but it's been many years now since they first heard it, and the 52 Hz whale is heard every year and seems to be doing just fine. Next up at number 5 we have the boing. In the 1950s, US submarines near California and Hawaii picked up a mysterious noise that sounded like nothing they had ever heard. They called it the boing, and I'm sure you can tell why by this. It made news all over the world, but its source was a mystery for 50 years until in 2002 when scientists said it was the sound of minke whales, again off the coast of Hawaii. Always the bloody minke whales. Coming in at number 4 now, we have slow down. Slow down is an interesting one on this list because it's been heard many times. It was first recorded on May 19th, 1997. At first, it shocked listeners and many people thought it was the sound of a giant squid. Yes, a giant squid living deep below the ocean surface. It lasted 7 minutes and was called slow down because the frequency gradually decreased over time. It's been 20 years and it's still being detected. At the number 3 spot we have the Upsweep. This was one of the first sounds recorded by the Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory in 1991. It was loud enough to be heard across the whole Pacific Ocean. Now although it's heard every year without fail, scientists still aren't sure what exactly the sound is coming from, and the worrying thing is it's getting quieter every single year. It may eventually disappear and we'll never have known what caused it. Next up at number 2 we have the Star Wars noise. Now I know what you guys are thinking. How can anything in the ocean sound like something from Star Wars? I thought the same too, but then I heard this. It doesn't sound like anything natural, does it? That's why when it was detected they thought it must have come from a ship. It was eventually identified as coming from dwarf minke whales. I'm beginning to think that all minke whales are pretty creepy, or fans of Star Wars. Alright, finally now we've reached the number 1 spot and we have the whistle. Now if this one is an underwater whistle, it's the creepiest one I've ever heard. It was picked up in the Eastern Pacific on July 7th, 1997 and has a very haunting vibe to it. See what you guys think. Scientists think that unlike a lot of the sounds on our list, this one wasn't caused by humans, animals, or even ice quakes. They think the whistle is the sound of an underwater volcano erupting. Personally, I hope they're right because I don't like the thought of any creature making that noise.
Starting us off at number 10, the bloop. So out of all the sounds on this list here today, this is likely the one that is most well known. But of course, I'm gonna give you a little backstory just so we're all on the same page. Back in 1997, a large ultra-low frequency sound was detected by 2 hydrophones around 4,800 kilometers apart in the Pacific Ocean. And as this strange sound became available to the public, many people began to speculate that the noise may even belong to a large, undiscovered sea monster. I mean, you take a listen for yourself and see what you think. Now to be clear, in recent years scientists have dismissed the possibility of giant sea monsters and have instead suggested that what we are hearing is the sound of icebergs fracturing and cracking. But I mean, nothing is really set in stone. Why don't you guys let me know what you think the sound could be. Coming in at number 9, Julia. On March 1st, 1999, a weird sound was recorded by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration that raised many eyebrows in the process. Now, why this sound is called Julia is not super clear, since it sounds like a pretty deep sigh or whine, but hey, I enjoy the imagination. Now, as far as conspiracies go, there are tons of people out there who believe it comes from some kind of undiscovered sea creature or even a monster. But why don't you take a listen and see for yourself. Now, aside from the fact that people can't determine what the sound was coming from, many were also taken aback by how loud it was, which has only added fuel to the mystery. Officially speaking, experts have theorized that it is just an iceberg running into the sea floor, meaning that we are hearing a super loud squeak essentially. But even so, nothing is 100% confirmed, so an undiscovered sea monster is not totally out of the question. Moving on to number 8. The train. First recorded in 1997 by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, it is believed this sound originated in Antarctica's Ross Sea and was named the train sound, well, for the obvious reason that it sounds like a train. Now, the suspected culprit of the train sound is an iceberg dragging along the ocean floor, but even so, the chance of it being something far more dangerous and mysterious is not entirely out of the question. So, I guess we'll just have to wait and see if more information becomes available. I mean, who knows? Maybe it could even be a mermaid. Coming in at number 7. The whistle. Many say that the whistle, just as its name would suggest, sounds like a kettle of boiling water. But if I'm being honest, I hear more of a rumble or a hum. Either way, it was first recorded in July of 1997 by a single hydrophone, making it impossible to pinpoint its source, and it remains one of the sounds that has continued to stump experts time and time again. Now, tell me what you hear. Do you hear a whistle? I mean, is this one of those frequency things where only some people can hear something, or do you guys hear a humming sound also? Now, according to NOAA, similar sounds have been recorded coming from erupting volcanoes, but even so, they have not ever been able to determine with certainty what or who is creating this terrifying sound. Next up at number 6, slow down. Apparently there was something about the year of 1997, because it seems like almost every sound on this list, including this next one, was recorded by the NOAA that year. Now, what is especially interesting about this underwater noise is that it gets its name due to the fact that it descends in frequency over roughly 7 minutes, which is pretty unusual. Now, my first reaction to this sound is that it sounds like a really slow motion yawn. And I suppose, for all we know, it could be just that, the yawn of a terrifying sea creature, although others say it sounds kind of like when a plane or helicopter is passing over you. However, scientists are inclined to believe it is not quite as exciting and that it's just the result of a drifting iceberg coming to a stop. But what do you guys think? Next up at number 5, Upsweep. Our next unidentified sound was first detected by hydrophones in 1991, but continues to pop up year after year. According to the NOAA, the sound appears to be seasonal and is more often found in spring or autumn, but there are still other times of the year this peculiar noise can be found lurking in the deep sea. Now, to me, it sounds almost like a car alarm or something of that nature. I mean, take a listen. Is that what you guys hear too, or am I crazy? Now, there are some theories that the sound is coming from an area of undersea volcanic activity, which, I mean, could be interesting, but the truth is scientists have yet to be able to fully explain what could be making this strange deep sea sound, or why the volume of it has been declining since it was first discovered over 30 years ago. Moving on to number 4, Challenger deep moans. At the very bottom of the Mariana Trench, there is a point called the Challenger Deep. This point is the deepest point known on Earth with a depth of around 35,000 feet. However, since it is so deep, it's been pretty hard to explore. So similarly to other deep waters, we don't really know what's going on down there. However, in 2016, a recording picked up some very creepy low moans coming from its depths that are, well, pretty spooky to say the least. Right? That's a bit unnerving. Now, because there is so little we've discovered at those depths to begin with, some online think this has to be some kind of undiscovered creature, but truth be told, we don't really know what it is, just that it's a little creepy. Coming in at number 3, a sea monster? Not to be dramatic and jump on a conspiracy theory bandwagon, but just listen to this clip and tell me you aren't a little stressed about what the hell this could be. So what you just heard is a noise that truthfully no one knows much about, or where it came from. However, I don't know about you, but it sounded like a deep and guttural growl, which can't be a good thing. Now the question is, could it be from some undiscovered creature, or do we have a terrifying deep sea demon on our hands? All I can say is that I don't like the sound of that thing no matter what it is. I mean, even if it isn't some insanely massive bone-crushing monster, I'm still not interested in getting anywhere near it. Coming in at number 2, the ping. According to local northern Canadian hunters, a strange pinging noise was heard coming from the Arctic sea floor back in 2016. Enough residents heard and reported the strange ocean floor noise that the Canadian military actually came to investigate further. But from there, it seems to have been a dead end. The military aircraft failed to find anything hidden in the waters and detected no noise at all, despite the locals swearing by it. But what was the noise that they all heard? Well, it sounded like this. But where could it have gone? And where the heck was it coming from in the first place? If you ask conspiracy theorists, they believe it to have been Russian submarines spying on them, while others have chalked it up to the movement of ice sheets, which are known to make strange, bizarre noises from time to time. And last up in our number 1 spot today, the Devil's Cauldron. Also known as Diana's Punch Bowl, the Devil's Cauldron is a geothermal location in Nevada that has long been associated with a legend here and there. Now, some say the area is extremely haunted, while others claim it's actually been cursed, but after hearing this sound come from the water there, I have to admit it's pretty easy to get on board with either of those theories. So what I'm going to show you in a second here is footage from a man who decided to visit the Devil's Cauldron and do some investigating into the alleged curse himself. When he got there, he put an iPhone 11 into the cauldron, and that's when something very scary happened. I mean, pardon me, is this supposed to be some sort of portal to the underworld for cursed and damned souls? It sounds so much like screaming, I actually can't quite believe it. Safe to say, this is not a place I will be exploring on my own anytime soon.
Wow, that was a good video. If you want even more good content like this one, then check out this video next. It's about abandoned places where everything was left behind. Click the video now to find out more. See you guys in the next video.